Do you have any questions for me? Let me actually check the chat box to see if there is any questions so far. Okay. No questions. Do you have any questions for me? Yes, Victor. Not most of the final, but like since it's just one experiment, for the one experiment, if you get like 4 questions, that's a lot of questions, right? 4 or 5 questions. If you get out of 15, that's a lot of questions. So, so experiment 18, and also understanding experiment 18 is going to help you a lot with experiment 19, part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the unknown identification. Yes. Any other questions, concerns? No? Okay. It's going to be, again, very short introduction or discussion because the format is same as last class. Today we are only doing one part of the experiment 19. If you have watched the video before, that's even better because you already know which parts we are not doing. And for the aldehydes and ketones, first you have to make sure that your compound is not alcohol, is not phenol, is not carboxylic acid, which you approach that with the solubility test. So when it comes to if it narrows down that your compound could be aldehyde or ketone, then we can do some classification tests to see if it's aldehyde or if it's ketone. If it's ketone, is it going to be like methyl ketone or non-methyl ketone? So if it's aldehyde, it has a hydrogen attached to carbonyl group, and this hydrogen attached to carbonyl group, this carbon can be further oxidized. But if it's a ketone that you don't have hydrogen attached, you have 2 carbon attached to both either side of the carbonyl is another carbon. That means you have a ketone. You cannot oxidize this by the just normal oxidizing agent. And then you could have ketone or you could have a methyl ketone. When you have a ketone, that means 2 R groups attached to one on each side of carbonyl group. They are not methyl group. But if it's a methyl ketone, one of the R groups here is going to be methyl CH3, which is unique. And there is like one unique test, which is called the iodoform test, that it can give a precipitate for methyl ketone. Some of the reactions that carbonyl group can go through is like reaction with hydroxylamine. You get oxime or aryl hydrazone, you would get hydrazone, and you can also make it react with which we are not doing this. These are just examples of some of these reactions that both aldehydes and ketones can react with these reagents. We are only going to concentrate or be concerned about the reactions that we actually use the reagent in this experiment. So one of those reagents is a 2,4-dinitrophenylhydrazine reagent that if you have either aldehyde or ketone is going to give like a yellow precipitate, which is going to confirm that you have aldehyde or ketone. Let me just make sure that I start actually recording. I'm not sure. Yeah, okay, good. So, which is not going to tell you is it either aldehyde or ketone, but it would say is either or. It could be aldehyde or it could be ketone. Yellow precipitate. And it forms very fast. You actually don't need any heat. It doesn't require any heat. Heat would make it, make sure that you do have, precipitate, but this doesn't take it. The reaction is very fast. It takes just few seconds actually for the product to form. When you make sure that it's either aldehyde or ketone, now the next step would be, is it aldehyde or is it ketone? When you do tolerance test, with the tolerance test, if the compound is aldehyde, because of that hydrogen that is attached to carbonyl group, it can be now, aldehyde can be oxidized. When aldehyde is oxidized, it will be oxidized to carboxylic acid, which in basic solution, it would form actually carboxylate ion, but this is a carboxylic acid in basic solution. So if aldehyde is oxidized, then your oxidizing agent, which is silver in here, in toluene reagent, is going to be reduced. And when it does reduce, it's going to, the silver +1 would change to silver 0, which is a precipitate, or is going to settle down or precipitate on the glass, and we see a silver mirror. So if we have a silver mirror, formation of silver mirror, then that means your compound was aldehyde. You don't want to do toluene test before doing the DNP test. So first you want to do for DNPH test to make sure it's aldehyde or ketone. Then you would do the toluene test to see if it's aldehyde or is ketone. We go to chat to see. Yes, the silver metal will precipitate. Very good. Yes, that is true. Very good. And then it would form the silver mirror. Yes. The other test that you could do is iodoform test. What the iodoform test indicates is like, this is the compound that it's not, it didn't form silver mirror, so it's ketone. And after you know it's ketone, then you do the iodoform test. Because iodoform test, it would react with the methyl ketone. Methyl ketone, when you have like R group, this side could be methyl, ethyl, propyl, whatever other link, other alkyl groups. One side is a CH3. So if you add the iodoform reagent, which is the sodium hydroxide and the KiI2, because iodine is non-polar compound, it doesn't dissolve in water, but it does somehow dissolve in potassium iodide solution. It's a brown color solution. When you add that to methyl ketone, it's going to form a precipitate. That precipitate is known as the iodoform, is a yellow color precipitate. Iodoform, like a chloroform, is a CHCl3. Iodoform is a CHI3. When iodoform precipitate forms, then it confirms that your ketone was actually a methyl ketone, which makes you step closer to identify your unknown, what type of compound you have. So we're just gathering information to see what is the compound, what is the actual compound. And then you use combination of physical property and chemical property and classification tests in order to match that compound with one of the compounds that you have in the list at the end of the lab manual, which you would actually use that for unknown compound. We are not doing unknown identification for this experiment, even though we have the procedure. But when you start with your unknown, you come back to this page for the unknown, and you can get the use the procedure for your unknown identification. Chromic acid test. What is chromic acid? Is another oxidizing agent. What would be the conclusion if it's a positive test or negative test? If it's a positive test, that means you had aldehyde, a carbonyl compound that gave positive test with 2,4-dinitro. That means it has carbonyl group. Is it aldehyde or ketone? Now that you know it's aldehyde or ketone, when you mix it with chromic acid, if it does react, that means the orange color of dichromic acid goes to green color, then we know that is the compound is aldehyde, or your unknown is aldehyde. But if it does not react, that means you have ketone, just like toluene reagent. So it's, you could do 1, or you could do 2, or you could do 3. But if you notice in the lab, when you watch the video, we didn't have the Schiff's test reagent out. I didn't do the experiment. We normally don't do that experiment, but we have at least 2 tests that confirms you have aldehyde or you don't have aldehyde. One is the toluene reagent, and the other one is the other one is the, tell me, the other one is the chromic acid test. And you could also say if your compound is methyl ketone or not. So if you look at these compounds, now here, if you have like 5 compounds, the first 2 on the right side, these are phenols. Then you have methyl ketone, you have aldehyde, then you have a ketone. How would you discriminate your compound is phenol or not? If you check the solubility, this is what I'm talking about, experiment 18. It helps you to understand experiment 19, different parts of experiment 19 as well. So if it dissolves in 10% sodium hydroxide, that means you have phenol. If it doesn't dissolve, then you have the other three. Yes?
Doctor, could you please clarify for me why the structure in the middle out of the first 5 is called methyl ketone? Because the thing is, I'm not seeing, the count. I know is it called the alpha carbon is the one in the carbonyl group, but then the methyl group attached to
if you do you see the highlighted part?
Yes.
Okay, that in like line angle structure, it represents just one carbon. So if you have just one line attached to carbonyl group, if you have just one line with the angle, that represents the methyl group.
Okay.
So that's, yes, the alpha carbon, and it's just one carbon.
The phenyl ring, or the actual benzene ring, that is not considered in naming the structure?
It is considered, but this is not a is not the naming, it's classification. So in general, when we say, yes, when we say we have a ketone, and then we say specifically we have methyl ketone, or we could, for example, we could say we have alcohol, but we could say specifically we have a primary alcohol. Okay. So it's just, yes.
This is just for classification purposes. Okay, thank you.
I'm glad you asked the question. Very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, if the compound does not dissolve in sodium hydroxide, then we know that is not phenyl, so it could be one of these three. Now, when you have those possibility of one of those three, if you do 2,4-dinitrophenylitrazine, then all three of them will precipitate. That's just confirming that these are either aldehyde or ketone. And then you want to discriminate, is it aldehyde or is not aldehyde, then you could do tolerance test. When you do tolerance reagent, when you add tolerance reagent, if it's positive, then you know it's aldehyde. And if it's negative, means it's not aldehyde. So it could be one of the other two ketones. So you have these two possible as a possible. And name or class for your compound. So when you have these two, then you want to see, is it methyl ketone or is not methyl ketone? Then you can do the iodoform test. Iodoform test, if it's positive, then would give you methyl ketone, which means that one of the R group is methyl. And then if it's not precipitating, then we know that is the other ketone. So these are some of the classification tests again. You're practicing, you're recording down our observation. How would it look like if it's positive or it's negative, to train your eyes and your thoughts. So this way you can get closer, step closer to identifying the unknown. We are not performing tests for unknown, but keep in mind you have a procedure here that can help you in 2 weeks from now when you are actually working with the unknown. And derivatization is the process that you can do derivatization. And when do you use the derivatization is the case that just like experiment 12, when you had 2 or 3 boiling point that they were very close to one another, so boiling point could not help you to identify your compound. And then what you did at that point, you derivatize that, or you oxidize your compound to change to carboxylic acid, solid compound, knowing that melting point for those 3 compounds, they were significantly different. And that was the benefit of it. So when you oxidize, you go to solid compound, you measure the melting point, then from the melting point of the product, you can draw back conclusion into what was your unknown. Very exact same idea. and we used it the first week of the semester in Organic 2 lab. We are using it last week of the semester in the Organic 2 lab. But the concept is the same. Derivatization is used when we have the compound, we know what type of functional group is, but we find in that table, we find 2 or 3 compounds that they are very similar, they have very similar melting point. So by just using the information from melting point of compound or the boiling point of the compound, we cannot identify which one of these 2 compounds is or unknown. Then we do derivatization, and I will show you the table for derivatization last week also when you are working with the unknown to help you to choose which derivatization unit or agent you should use in order to discriminate what is going to be a compound. But you're not doing the unknown. At this point, make sure you read the small area of the procedure and also, the theory, just to help you in the future how to get this done. Okay, do you have any questions for me?
Doctor, I have a question.
Yes.
With regards to the report for this lab, will it be similar in formatting as the previous one?
Yes, with the difference that here you only are dealing with one group of the compound. One part is the aldehydes and ketones. The theory for aldehydes and ketones, they are very similar because both of them are carbonyl compound. And then the discussions and the reagents that they give positive for both of them or positive and negative is just limited number, so you don't have to be worried about separating the paragraphs. So it's going to be very similar. You can make one table for the reagents that you're adding, and then with that one table you're adding the reagents, so you have your 3 compounds and you have the reagents. So your reagents, it could be all in one table. The first one like 2,4-dinitro, the second one would be it was the toluene reagent, the third one was iodoform test, and the last one was like chromic acid test. So you could have the all observation in one table, and there's no numerical value. It's just the observation that you would add to each cell, corresponding cell.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions you might have? If you don't have questions, I'm going to call attendance. I will also, next class, I will also ask you again if you have any questions from part 1, 2, part 3, experiment 18, part 4 and 5. So hopefully, if you have any questions, you write your questions down, you ask next class before you move to the following week that you're dealing with the unknown. So hopefully, practicing with the known samples, it does help you with the unknown sample. Okay, now for attendance, Brianna. Thank you. Victor.
Here.
Ahmed. Thank you. Ahmed. Perfect. Michael. Karina. Alavia. Julia. Melissa. Denise, are you here? Okay, perfect. Therese. Gian. Cindy. Natalia. Natalia. Not here. Okay, Jones. Johns. Taylor. And Christopher. Thank you. Any questions? Okay. If you don't have questions at this point, thank you so much and have a nice day. I will be here for just in case if a couple people who were not here, they will still join, or if there was any reason, and answer any questions that you might have. Thank you. If there's no question, I'm going to stop recording because then it would be easier to download.